Welcome to episode number 10 of Roots Connections on Q. We are back for yet another episode of Roots Connections on Q for today, Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021. I am Simone Mathieu, and it is great to be joining you yet again for another candid conversation, another opportunity to advance the lives of our Dominican brothers and sisters at home and abroad. So again, welcome to another episode of Roots Connections on Q. We are here to discuss beyond the missing tuition payments. So the overarching question is, how are we securing the future of our Dominican students? And of course, we're still very concerned about the surging numbers of COVID-19 cases, but there are other critical issues which need our immediate attention, which must also be discussed as well. So speaking of which, if you're interested in even further discussions on the COVID-19 cases that are rising in Dominica, Mr. G and his panelists had a very informative discussion on some natural options for boosting your immune system last night. So if you missed that episode of the Global View on Q, be sure to check it out on Facebook at WiseQ95, WiseQFM, or also you can check it out on the Q95 website, q95da.com. So we have another packed program for you as we look at all the implications, not only for the missing tuition payments, but for our students studying overseas. We will look at the entire system of how scholarships are awarded in Dominica, if there's a national policy which is in line with the development of Dominica, how the tuition disbursements to pay tuition and other expenses are disbursed, and should students be required to reapply for their scholarships each and every year. So our guests are here. We have Dr. Dion George out there in Atlanta, Georgia, as well as Mr. Lennon Mathieu, and they are here and they are ready to get the conversation started. But before we get started, let me once again say a pleasant good evening to you, whether you're joining us via Q95 Radio in Dominica or Q95DA or all the other streaming platforms where you're able to listen to Q95. Don't forget, if you've missed an episode of this program, Roots Connections, including the last one we did on how are we coping and distressing during COVID-19, you can head on over to q95da.com anytime to catch up on the episodes you may have missed. So a special good evening to everyone also who is joining us live on Facebook at WiseQFM, as well as Push Past 10 and DA Rose. Don't forget to share the live, click the notification button to find out whenever we go live. We have a very active Facebook audience, so we're looking forward to engaging with you via Facebook and via your phone calls as well at about the 9 p.m. hour. And a special thank you to Mr. G and the Q95 family, including Lambie on the console and Sherwin Norris, our engineer who keeps us connected. So again, good evening and a very special welcome to our guests who are joining us on the program. So good evening, Dion, and good evening, Lennon, as we unmute your mics and we get the conversation going. Good evening, guys.
Hey, good evening, Simone. And
how are you?
Fine. Good evening to Dominica and your listeners at home and abroad, and on the websites, on the web portals. Happy to be here, and thanks for the invite to share a perspective tonight.
Absolutely. Dion, good evening to you.
Yes, good evening, Simone, and thank you very much for the invite, and good evening to the listening public. Good evening to Lambie, and of course Sherwin and Lennon, my good friend, Body, and if I may say, my roommate. I let the bag out of the cat very early, or the cat out of the bag rather. Yeah. And so I'm happy to be here. Hopefully our conversation is one that would be informative. Hopefully our conversation is one that we can leave with some recommendations and have a healthy interaction with the listening public. Of course, we want to thank God for the opportunity to share information. We want to thank Holy Spirit, who is the fountain of all wisdom. And so I am happy to be here, and good evening.
Yes, thank you for that. And you know, we always like to get the conversation started off by just celebrating our Dominican heritage. So, in just about 5 minutes each, can you tell us who you are, where you come from in Dominica, and any person or institution you would like to credit for the person that you are today? So, we will get started with Dr. George Dion, if you want to jump ahead on that information.
Yes, yes. I am a lecturer of political science, um, and also I am the director of religious education. In that capacity, I teach courses like constitutional law, public administration, international relation, global politics, and American government. And in my capacity as the director of religious education, I basically manage about 5 teachers in the sacraments of the church, First Communion and Confirmation, and also non-sacramental education as well. In terms of the institutions, I can credit for shaping my values and my beliefs. Uh, Predominantly and primarily, I would say that is the family as an agent of my political socialization, particularly my mother, Margaret George, and my father, who has deceased, Clifford George. My father taught me values of hard work. If you ask anybody from Salisbury, they will tell you that Clifford George was a very hardworking man. And he taught me persistence, to keep on fighting for what I believe. He taught me integrity, that I should be fair and that I should not take the shortcuts. I would also say that my mother and my grandma has influenced my spiritual aspect of my life, particularly my grandma as well, who brought me to church weekly. Back then we called that tit mass in the early mornings, 6 o'clock. We walked down the entire village. And, you know, I still do those things when time permit. I still try to go to church during the week, not just on Sundays. And so I'm very eternally grateful for those persons who have influenced me in that way. Of course, I've had individuals who have influenced me. I've had good persons like Father Celsus Ugis and many others who have influenced me. I would also say that another institution would be my work in school, the education system. It has taught me to be patient. It has taught me to fight for what I believe. It's also given me a sense of empathy when I work with students, to recognize that persons are learning at different rates. And so I've come to be more, I would say, understanding of persons' individual needs. But it also taught me accountability. Being a professor, if I give a deadline, I expect students to do that. And of course, as a teacher myself, I expect to do my end, correct their paper in a timely manner, so forth. You know, it reminds me of a former President Reagan, who says we must trust but verify. And so we want to have a healthy learning environment, but I also have to make sure that persons do what they ought to do. And I would say finally, perhaps it's not an exhaustive list, but absolutely that sports as an institution has been an integral part of who I am. Lennon might be able to tell you that. Lennon, I mean, I would leave that for your judgment, but you will decide who was the best batsman in Midwestern University. And but it has taught me how to appeal, you know, when you say umpire, you know, to fight for what you believe. It has taught me strategy, you know, it's not always the fastest bowler. Sometimes you have to set up a fieldsman and bowl to a certain field. And it has taught me how to navigate life. And so I'm eternally grateful for those institutions and for those persons who have had a meaningful impact in my life. Yes.
Yes, thank you for that, Dion. Let's go over to Lennon for your introduction.
Yes, the last time I was on a similar program, it was with you, Simone. But I am currently residing in Dallas, Texas. I got up there through pursuit of a degree at the Midwestern State University in 2000. I'm currently a registered professional geologist in the state of Texas doing environmental consultation. I've been doing that for the past 17 years, both here in Texas, and I spent 10 years in Florida doing similar work. Prior to migration to the U.S. For studies, I taught for 2 years geography at the Portsmouth Secondary School. Did geography and maths and taught with a bunch of folks who are currently might be part of our conversations tonight. Prior to that, I spent 2 years at the sixth form college in Dominica, C4 That's where I met Dion. Dion and I were actually C4 students in Miss Erin Francis geography class. So we had fun memories there, and we were also in the Catholic youth group together. And I remember one time we were at a retreat house in Eggleston where we met Father Coffee. I'm planning a youth rally in Dominica right before we went to study. So for some reason, in life, it's like the universe. Things go wrong, but for some reason, people and situations always come in full circles. I grew up in the village of Benz, Sanzimi and Solda. Anybody who knows that place, my mom was a preschool teacher. Hello, Mom, Lucina Mathieu. And my dad, deceased, was a school principal, Mr. Linton Mathieu, also a lay minister in the church. Grew up in the church. Most people know him for his strict and rigid discipline. Being a rigid disciplinarian. I grew up, like Dion indicated, understanding that you work hard for what you want in life. You don't envy anybody else's things, and you be humble. And I learned that from home. I also had a lot to learn from my grandmother, Veron Fabian. I also came from the Fabian clan, and she's probably one of the brightest lady I have ever met. She had not been to secondary school, but was able to read and write in that time. And I learned so much wisdom from having conversations with her and some of the older folks growing up in the community of Benz, going to the garden and having conversations with some of the elders. And I always say these people are the people you learn the most wisdom from, because they have the biggest education, which is life. And if you're learning from somebody who's already 80 years, you can imagine the wealth of knowledge and wisdom you will learn. And I was fortunate enough to attend the Benz Primary School. I attended the Vickers Primary School with my dad and the Pebush Primary School, so I have friends in all these communities. And I think what molded me is my experience growing up in Dominica as a youth, living in the various communities, seeing the little nuances and making all these friends. In my spare time, I represented Dominica in basketball. In '97, I went to Jamaica to represent Dominica for the National Youth Basketball tournament there. And I also played cricket. Dion and I talk a lot about cricket, and we had a little bantering going on at MSU. And also I played for some time in the South Florida Cricket League. And one of my other pastimes is music. I taught myself to play the keyboards, the drums, the saxophone, and I played in a band in Florida for a couple of years while I was still working. It's just doing the fun stuff and being down to earth. And one of my passion is agriculture and music and sports. These are some of my passions. But happy to be here. Happy to share my experience. Like I always say, hopefully we can elevate this conversation to beyond the skin, deeper than the skin, not just the surface, but something that has meaning, something that has, an education component to it, and something that has solutions so that people can, even if we can influence people to talk in this direction, because you can't influence action if you don't influence ideas, and ideas comes through conversation, and the level of ideas you have come through the depth of your conversation. So if we can have deep conversation about the situation we are about to talk about, then hopefully we can create that idea and create that action.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that. And thank you again for joining us this evening for this important conversation. So we have quite a bit to get to this evening. But before we do, I see that our folks on Facebook have already begun to sign in. So just want to say a pleasant good evening to Medina Senhouse, David Joseph. Let's see, Indigenous Bushman is here, Sandra Norris. Hermina George, Sabria Senhouse is on the Facebook Live. So we welcome them to the program and we encourage them to share the live as we get ready to embark on this journey together. So what will we be discussing this evening? For the purposes of this discussion, we will talk about the purpose of sending our students to college. What is the national policy to ensure that students who are awarded scholarships pursue areas which fit into the strategic plan for the development of Dominica, the way forward for high-performing, well-deserving students who show great potential to aid in the development of Dominica. We will also look at, let's make sure I say exactly what we're talking about. We will also look at the official scholarship approval letter to take a look to see if students are in fact allowed to reapply, if they have to reapply for their scholarships each and every year. And we will also look at some professional recommendations. What is the way forward? How can we assist as a nation to ensure that these students are receiving the education that they deserve? However, I think it is important that since we are all here, we're all from Midwestern State University, I thought that it would be particularly of interest if we share our experiences as international students, since we all went to Midwestern State University. So I will start with myself. I went to MSU, as we call it, back in 1995. Around that time, don't want to age myself, but back in 1995. And it was a great opportunity. You know, sometimes growing up in Dominica, your parents do not have the financial resources to be able to send you to college, but you seek the opportunities. You talk to other folks who have gone before you. You listen to if recruiters are coming down. You just find the information, and once you get the opportunity to go to abroad to study, it is such an exciting but overwhelming experience, because here you are finally going to pursue your dream of attaining higher education, but then the anxiety of having to pretty much acclimatize to a new culture, get to know the ways and the traditions of a new culture, even right down to the way we speak. And I'm sure you guys can attest to this, that we have to change the way we speak, because in Dominica, we speak very casually and everyone understands us. But when you move overseas, you realize that that is local Dominica parlance, and you have to adapt to speaking American English, right? So, you know, again, a very exciting time, but also a very overwhelming time as well, which is why I'm happy we're having this conversation, because to add yet another issue on top of the overwhelming experience of leaving your home, leaving your family, and going off to college, to now be concerned with whether or not your tuition is going to be paid, just adds another level of frustration for the students. So you guys can go ahead and share your experiences. Lennon, if you want to jump in.
Yeah. Okay. So to share this experience, it would be remiss of me to not share, that why I ended up in there. So I'll give you a little story. Um, as I said, I taught at the Portsmouth Secondary School for 2 years. So I was a geography teacher there, at age 19. And I knew at some point, my dad being a school principal and doing a lot of farming on the weekends and raising pigs and all that stuff, I knew I needed to do something. I had the capability. I knew I had the gift and the talent. And I thought getting a degree would give me an opportunity to earn some more income and to advance. And that was what spurred me to get into study. So I just went online in an internet cafe at Cable and Wireless in Portsmouth, sending a couple of applications. And before I knew it, I was on my way to Midwestern State University in probably 3 or 4 months. I did the SAT and all that stuff. But I'll give you the personal experience. We were rushing from the airport, and I think a lot of the kids probably relate with that. Rushing from the airport, it was a go, go, go. Prior to that, I found Dion was going to school, so we linked up and we became roommates for a little while. But the interesting personal story is that getting through the airport, September 11th had not happened yet. That was in 2000, and we were rushing from Puerto Rico, rushing from Dominica, and we get on the airport. We get on that airline to the U.S., and I walked in the plane and I froze for a second because it just looked huge, and a bunch of white faces staring at me. I had not been used to that. That's the personal experience. And I sat down on the plane, the airplane took off, and then 10 minutes after, I remember my family, and I just burst out crying.
Wow.
At 21-year-old, it just happened. You couldn't help it for 5 minutes. I'm there. But to get to Midwestern State University, we get to Wichita Falls. We get to Texas, Dallas. We landed in Dallas. They picked us up, and it was a different experience because I had not been out of Dominica in a country like the US. And at age 21, you're just basically taking a leap of faith, just getting out there and seeing what the world has to offer. I mean, nobody pushed me. I had that drive and wanted to go advance myself. And can you imagine coming out from Benz with one road in, one road out, and you get into a place where there are highways and an airport that looks like planes are on the ground. And that's the kind of personal experience you get. And I was so determined, to determine on my goal to get an education that you quickly assimilate with the environment by using the skills we have. Your eyes, your smell, you see things, you relate to things. What you don't relate, you can't relate to, you get used to it. It was tough the first month we got there because the temperature was like 120 degrees. One of the cool things, the Dallas Cowboys was training at the school, which was pretty cool. But I was wondering for a second, how are people living in that place? It was in the middle of the summer. And then right when the summer hit, the fall was a short period, and then it got cold. And your body's not used to that. And you get adjusted over the time. But school was, it's a challenge. It's hard work. I did 20 hours. I played football. I participated in activities. I participated in church. I did a double major. And then, it's a lot of study. It's missing home. Sometimes I would be in my class sitting down there and I'm not even hearing the professor because I'm thinking, what is my mom cooking? What is my brothers doing? What is my mother, my sisters doing? And, you're just thinking about home. What is my granny doing? And for 2 years, I missed home like every single day. I was homesick. I mean, going to church every Sunday, there were some songs that I couldn't even sing because if I sing them, you just get that overwhelming feeling. And that's the kind of personal feeling you have. So when you take that decision at 21, leaving your family behind, it's tough, it's rough. You don't know anybody. You make friends, you make enemies, you have challenges. But I think I would not give up this experience for anything else because I think that's what, you got to take risks sometime in life to have rewards. And if you have determination, you do what you have to do to get there. And I think it was a great experience overall.
Thank you, Dion.
Yes. Well, it's good that oh my God, I think something happened to my thing. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. We can see you.
Okay, good. So it's amazing that all three of us attended the same school. Interestingly, like Lennon mentioned, the universe has a way of pulling like minds together. Interestingly, on my way to Barbados, I met with Lennon. Lennon, I don't know if you recall.
Yes, I know.
When we went and get our visas, we end up being roommates. Remember that, Lennon? Yeah. We slept in the same by a police friend of mine from Barbados. And we slept there and then come to find that when we reached in Wichita Falls, Texas, we end up being roommates. Now, Lennon, I hope you don't mind me saying that, maybe I shouldn't. But being in the same room with someone who sleepwalks, and then have to say, hey, Lennon, you're dreaming. This is not your bed, right? And so that was my first such experience. But on a serious note, it was very emotional living. I was 20 years old and I was moving thousands of miles away. And so, of course, I missed my parents. I took this leap of faith. And of course, you have to deal with culture shock. And I'm saying that because, Simone, you asked about our own experience, but I'm saying that, and I'm thinking about the students right now who are studying. And, you have this emotional detachment from your home, from your family. And you have these things that you experience, you have never experienced before. For example, you come across discrimination, you come across racism, discrimination because you're from a different country, discrimination because you have an accent. Of course, you are struggling with financial difficulties. Your parents, by the way, made an ultimate sacrifice for most of us. they had to take loans and they had to pay interest on those loans. And of course, they're hoping that you do well, right? And this is very touching. I mean, Lennon says that when he went to church, you know, he avoids singing certain songs. But it was very emotional for me. I will confess, I did cry many a nights, many a nights. You know, I did cry, and you know, I can say that it was very emotional. One of the things I think I can share is our experience at Midwestern was not a typical college experience. For one, we were not living on campus, and so we were living in those apartments, and we had to walk to school. And obviously, walking to school in the winter in snow, right? And I remember, of course, the mornings that we had was not enough, so we had to work, right?
Yep. Yep.
But as international students, we cannot work off campus, and so the jobs that were available for us were the sanitary engineers to clean the toilets and so forth,
Cafeteria.
the cafeteria. And I remember particularly I working in the kitchen, and then I had to wash the dishes and then rush to class. And I'm entering the class smelling like grease, you know, and smelling like food. And everybody else looked so pretty. And then, you know, this foreign guy is serving the students food, and then I go back and sit with them. Of course, I recall one night I got a job on the dorms in the dormitory, and then the hours we get is the graveyard hours. So my shift was 2:30 in the morning, and I recall walking to school. Lennon, I don't know if you remember, and I
Yeah.
I met a drunk individual, and he was swearing racist words. It was a snowy night, and I said, "Man, I gotta go back to Dominica." I went back home, but to my surprise, I got an email. They said the weather was so terrible that they canceled work, right? But outside of those challenges, I think it was very rewarding. I must say that the Caribbean connection that we had, it helped me cope, right? So we played cricket very often, right? And of course, there were a lot of parties where you could meet people, and and more than anything else, I think the fact that we stuck through it, we stuck through it, and we were able to attain terminal degrees. I think it was worthwhile. I think all through the process, we had persons who supported us. Undoubtedly, we remember our parents, and you know these are the things that keep you going. You do not want to disappoint the people who have taken loans for you, and so forth. And I must say, thanks to the government of Dominica at the time, because they worked a deal where if you were able to maintain a certain grade point average, that you would get in-state tuition rather than paying this expensive out-of-state tuition. And it was a blessing to be able to have that financial assistance based, of course, on your academic performance, right? And so I think the experience was one that builds an individual. I think it makes you stronger, and it gives you experience of what the world is. But in all, I think it was an experience. Of course, it's tough, and I can definitely emphasize with the students now what they're going through, and it's just amazing that they have to go through something else with the insecurity of their payments, wondering are they going to be kicked out from school, having to go through the shame, because I'll tell you as an instructor, sometimes when you do not pay, you get a slip, and sometimes they have someone drop that slip for you, and it shows that you are not financially able, and that's it. That's embarrassing. It's sad, and then it makes you feel almost depressed. You know, that is added upon all the other experience that you are going through. And so I think this conversation that we are having tonight is worth being held. Hopefully that we can perhaps make some recommendations that can make life better for the students that are studying right now.
Yes, thank you for that. And thank you for providing a really great backdrop for the conversation that we're about to have. So just a couple of disclaimers. We did try to get a couple of the students to come on the program and be a part of the discussion, but of course they were afraid of retribution, so they would not agree to be a part of the program. And we also were not able to get anyone from the Ministry of Education to join us here this evening. So let's get the ball rolling. So other than Grambling University, do we know how many colleges are owed tuition and fees, and in what amounts? So we talk a lot about Grambling University, but do we know if there are other colleges out there that are owed tuition and fees?
I know I heard information of the University of the West Indies. There's another school called Monroe, and of course, Midwestern State University. And I heard there are other schools. And the last I heard, there were issues with the Cuban students, but I don't know a whole lot about that. But I can imagine if there are some schools, so many schools that tuition are outstanding, it should be an across the board problem.
Yeah, Dion, are you aware of any others?
Particularly aware of any school that have experienced the extent at which Grambling and Midwestern went through. But on a lighter note, I have friends who study in other areas, including Saudi Arabia and other areas, who have expressed to me that their tuition were late, and they were facing a cancellation and being dropped off from school. And so it seems to me that the policy and the procedural policy of paying student tuition, I will submit, need some attention.
Yes, and that is where I want us to go with this conversation. So, is there a national policy? I think we had a conversation before, and at one point there was a scholarship committee in Dominica which was responsible for ensuring that the students' goal for an education were aligned with the national development policy in Dominica. So, as far as you know, and of course, if anyone is listening via Facebook or via the radio and you'd like to call in on this particular point, you can do so. But is there a national policy for the scholarships that students receive and how it aligns with the development of Dominica?
If you don't mind me saying, in terms of the policy, let me get to that. But even before I talk about a policy that I am aware of, we first have to recognize the importance of having a national policy, right? And so education is not simply a personal achievement. I see education as a national policy that would, in effect, help individuals, but more than just individuals, it can build a nation. And I did some research, and there are some statistics that speaks about the importance of education. For example, it says that the median weekly earnings in 2019 for persons with a higher level education, like a doctorate or a professional degree, they would earn more than 3 times, triple someone with a high school degree or without a degree at all. And workers with at least a bachelor's degree would earn somewhere about 1,000 US dollars weekly. That is how important education is, as compared with one who does not have a degree. The other statistic that supports that is the Department of Labor in the United States. It validates the fact that the unemployment rate among people who have professional degrees is significantly lower. And so in times of bad economic times, the people who tend to hold on to jobs are persons with degree. In addition, it says that the earnings of persons with degree are increasingly higher than those without a degree. And so the idea here is that having a degree and the importance of the government seeing education as a policy is that, one, it would improve the living standards of individuals. Then, of course, you can help your parents, you can help your children. And so it makes it a better home for the family and a better home for the country on a whole. In respect to your direct question about having a national policy, that is a little bit dubious, a little bit unclear. But from my understanding, I understand that we do have some sort of policy, and I can stand corrected. But as far as I understand, I think from the Prime Minister, he said that he wants, it's a pretty ambitious goal, and there's nothing wrong in having an ambitious goal. But I think he mentioned to the effect that he wanted a college graduate in every household by a certain time. I'm not sure if it's 2025, thereabout, but at a certain time. I think that's a really ambitious goal. And like I said, there is nothing wrong with having an ambitious goal. But as we're having this discussion, I think it's worth operationalizing and clarifying what is a policy and what is an education policy. For example, by definition, a policy is a course or principle of actions adopted or proposed by a government or party or business. So it's a course of actions, and it's not simply a campaign slogan. So it sounds nice to say that we are going to have a college graduate in every household, but what exactly does that comprise of? And so there are two things we want to talk about when we're talking about policy. One, you want to talk about the substantiative part of a policy. That is exactly what it entails. And secondly, one wants to speak of a procedural part of a policy. That is, how do you go about achieving that substantive statement, what that policy is? And so let's consider the current policy that has been noted, the one of having a college graduate in every household. One, are there specific fields that the government is looking at? Say, for example, I recall once upon a time, and perhaps even today, in fact, so today, that nursing is an area that is of high demand. Is the policy that the government has one that surrounds a demand, say, for example, nursing? Or perhaps is it one that circles around economic development? For example, fishery, or for example, food processing, or even manufacturing. I am aware of a young man in Salisbury, I don't recall his name, but I think he makes pepper sauce and gooseberry jam and coffee, local coffee. And I think for a young entrepreneur, I must say kudos to him. And so I mentioned that as an example to say, for example, that is the government looking at those young entrepreneurs and wanting to facilitate or create an environment that could enhance their business. And of course, a degree doesn't have to be a bachelor's degree or a PhD. It could simply be a training in food processing, a training like a nursing degree for the need of the country and something that can enhance the individual. And so the question number one about a national policy is, what is the criterion? Is it by field of study? A second question that one can evaluate is it by quantity? Is it a quantitative sort of calculation? For example, is it based on the entire country? For example, if each village would get 5 scholarships, and so, for example, Salisbury would get 5, St. Joseph would get 5, Rosa would get 5. Is it based on such of a equitable national policy? And I would really wonder if that's what it is, because I don't know of anybody that maybe have received scholarships from Salisbury on that level. If there is, I would like to know, because I think that's interesting, right? And we're trying to figure out what exactly is the policy. Another question that one must ask is to clearly define what that policy is. For example, there is this question of renewing the scholarships. Is that something that one wants to consider? I would suggest that there should be a criterion that says, if you are in good standing, if you meet a certain grade point average, and if you are enrolled, then it would be automatic that you have a scholarship. In fact, I think that alone would serve as incentive for students to do well, knowing that if I have a good grade point average, my scholarship is secure, as opposed to late payments, as opposed to fear of not having their tuition paid, and this whole idea of anxiety to the question of education. And so, to answer the question in sum, I think the ambitious one, graduate in every household, is an ambitious one. It might be a very good one, but to clearly define the procedural part of it. How does one secure a scholarship? Is it renewable? Is it based on a strategic economic approach that would benefit the individual and the country by at large? These are things I believe that the public ought to know, and that the students who receive those scholarships understand on what level and policy, an agreement that they are receiving those scholarships. And so these are just some of my thoughts on this national education policy.
Yes, thank you for that, Dion. And Lennon, we want to go over to you for your thoughts.
Yeah. So, thanks, Dion, for giving a wonderful explanation on the policy. But what I would like to say is, so you ask about a national policy. In our government structure, we have ministries. We have Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Tourism, and one of the consistent ministries we have is the Ministry of Education. So obviously, education is a very significant component of any country's development. So significant that there is a special ministry and a structure in place to facilitate the learning enhancement of our people. Why is it important? As Dion indicated, statistics show somebody with a higher level of education has the opportunity to earn more. Also, it is important because in the overall development plan of a country, education is key. And if it's key, then certainly the government has to apportion a certain budget to facilitate that development because it's not free. Anytime you're training, anytime you're developing, anytime you're learning, it's going to cost money, but it's an investment. It's an investment in people. So the fact that we already have a Ministry of Education indicates to all of us that education is important in the overall development of the country. So the Prime Minister's intention of having a policy that says one college graduate per household may be a noble intention, it may be a noble expression. And is in that light, we should think about why do we have the government paying for students to pursue further education in overseas in the University of the West Indies, in Monroe, MSU, and other areas. And as Dion indicated, if you're going to have a program like that, the first thing you should look at with any society that's developing must have a vision. And how does the education of our people fit into that vision? So here it is, if we have a program, they may have a program specifically for tertiary education, level education, because education starts basically from the time that kid is born, from the preschool up till the college level, and then to the postgraduate and so on. How does that fit into our overall development? So if the government is making an investment, the government must, one, know why they're making that investment and what is the ultimate goal of that investment. But we all know over a period of time that the world changes. So what we did 20 years ago might change. Look at where we are with the internet world and the programming and all that stuff. I mean, people make money with coding and programming. Things change, but there are some things that remain the same. The primary industries remain the same. We still got to feed the world. We still have to provide clean water. Some of these things still remain the same. So therefore, what we'd expect the government to do is to look at where are we going to go as a country in the next 20 years? What do we need to do to get there? And seeing that a Ministry of Education, which is key into the progress and the development of the country, what sort of education and skills do we need to invest in to get to where we want to be? So therefore, what I'm saying is that the investment in education has to be aligned with the development goals and the vision of the country. And once you make that analysis, once you have that vision, then the current program we're seeing should be geared towards doing that. So instead of giving kids scholarship without showing how it has helped us over the past 20 years, indicates to me that there has not been a proper development strategy for the scholarship program. We're talking about millions of dollars of investment. Break it down simple. If I put $500 in the bank for an investment, at the end of 2 years, I want to see what my investment has done for. After 20 years, if we had spent millions of dollars of investment, how are we capturing the benefit of all that investment into the students? I think there are several components. There are several components to this. There's the responsibility of the government to have that vision, to have that foresight, and to have a plan in place when they put that investment option in place. There is also a responsibility of the students, because not only that the students have a responsibility to do well, but understanding that they also play a part in the development of the country. The reason why you get in an education is so that you can use that resource to the advancement of your society. And as much as I'm going to give the government flack, the students also bear a certain level of responsibility to understand that I am doing this with my country's resources. So ultimately, my responsibility is to ensure that my country benefits from what it has invested in me. So I will leave that there. And there is also the responsibility of our society, the responsibility of our country to ensure that the investment work for us and to ensure that that investment is properly managed. Because if we don't ask those questions, if we don't bring up these issues, then we see a situation where for the past 20 years, millions of dollars have been pumped into the investment of our students, the investment of our money to develop our country. And I ask the question, what do we have to show for it? Do an analysis and say, what has that 20-year investment of millions of dollars in the education of our youth done for the vision we had 20 years ago of not just a narrow-minded vision of having one college graduate per household, but how does that add value to the household? How does that add value to the country?
Yes, and those are all powerful points that you're raising, and both you and Dion are doing an exceptional job in terms of talking about the investment in education. And Dion, I also like the point that you raised about criteria. What is the criteria? Because we're having a candid conversation, and we know of the sentiments that many people share, that many times the scholarships are given to students based on favor, for votes, based on favor, for the fact that their parents support the government. So, there goes the criteria out the window. There goes the 20-year planning that Lennon was just talking about. But before the two of you respond, I just want to remind everyone that you're listening to Roots Connections on Q95, the big station. I'm your host, Simone Mathieu, and this evening we are joined by Mr. Lennon Mathieu and Dr. Dion George, and we are speaking about beyond the missing tuition payments. How are we securing the future of our students in Dominica? And Facebook, I see the comments. I'm coming over to you. So keep the comments coming. I can already see that we're very engaged on Facebook. And at 9 p.m., we will go ahead and give out the phone numbers if you would like to call it and make a contribution to the program. So your thoughts, gentlemen, on what I just said?
Well, that would be very unfortunate and downright unproductive if a government policy is based upon nepotism and favoritism. I think such an important policy should be based upon the spirit of meritocracy, based on one's ability, or perhaps in retrospect, let's consider, for example, is it a policy based on need? Now, I mentioned different options. Perhaps it's based on a strategic economic development approach. For example, we need nurses. We want to enhance young manufacturers or food processing. But maybe the government is so, what I would say, sympathetic with persons of low economic income, and that a factor in determining who gets scholarship is based upon need, right? And so what that would entail, for example, is that the persons would have to show that my dad is a farmer, my mom is a housewife, these are the incomes, and they can support documents that would justify that. And perhaps that's a criterion that which they would consider. But if the assertion that was suggested, that it's based upon favoritism and nepotism and based upon party and favors, then quite frankly, I think it would be disservice to the country. It would be disservice to the taxpayers who has no favorites. That is, if everybody is paying tax, which people who work pay tax, then I think it should be fair, a clear policy that one can say that if I meet those requirements, then I should be considered, right? It shouldn't be something that is covered, and it shouldn't be something that, oh, I support a particular party, so yes, he will get it. No, it should be something where there is a, like I said, certain standards, certain principles that would be equitable, and that should be met without the local politics involved. I mean, speaking on a national level, that would be correct. Yes.
Lennon?
Yeah. So I had the fortunate experience of speaking to the director of international student services at Midwestern State University, and he gave me some insight into how the scholarship are apportioned with the Ministry of Education. As a matter of fact, I will speak on Midwestern State University had a deal directly with the Ministry of Education. I know when we went to Midwestern State University, the international student program dealt with the students when they came up here, because most of us at that time took loans from the aid bank, and the aid bank was the main source of financing for student loans. As a matter of fact, aid bank made its profits main profits from student loans back in the days. That was one of their key revenue generator. And we, Dion mentioned earlier, we had to keep a high GPA. We had to make sure we meet certain conditions to maintain this in-state tuition. So the director indicated that they had a deal with the Ministry of Education, where the Ministry of Education, through the college in Dominica, could get the students directly to MSU. And comparing to when I went there, when I came into Midwestern State, I only had 12 credit hours transferred from my physical geology and geography, and some of that wasn't even used. So I basically had to do everything from scratch. Whereas there were other Caribbean islands who students were coming up to the school with 30-something credit hours, 40-something credit hours. Why is that significant? It's significant because it cuts down the amount of years you would have had to study to get your degree. And in the long run, cutting down on the amount of money you would have to spend to graduate. Like I said, any investment, it costs money. And I also had the opportunity to talk to some of the students. Now, why this is particularly a tickling conversation and why we are here, it's because, like Dion indicated, policy. Where do we hear the initial policy of a government? Where do we hear the policy ideas of a government? When we have election every 5 years, the people who are running for office make promises. They make promises, they have manifestos indicating their plans. And it is supposed to be as a result of these plans and promises, they get voted into office. And when they get voted into office, they implement these things for the development of the country. That's where the vision is. So during the election, we saw promises on scholarships. We saw promises on so many other things. And like I said, paying students tuition is not bad in itself, but it's the intention, is the overall purpose. So at the end of the day, we saw over 150 Dominican students were at MSU. That's a large amount of Dominican citizens, by the way. You have 150 citizens in one school, and I'm not talking about just MSU. We're talking about MSU had 150, Monroe had a whole bunch, and I know Grambling have pretty close to 100. So that's probably just in the US, 200 of our Dominican young citizens, our promising leaders, our tertiary educated folks. Like Dion said, These are the folks who are going to earn more. These are the folks who are going to come with the creativity, the idea, the know-how, the intelligence. These are our future leaders. Believe it or not, one day the current old people we saw the passing of Patrick John. Believe it or not, one of these days, Carrot is going to go, and that's where the young ones are going to come. It's a fact. I am going to go. So at the end of the day, we have to look at that continuity. And while we educate our youth, is to ensure that the crop of people that are coming up, they are well educated and well suited to face the challenges that we have in Dominica. Look at where we have the hurricane that passed last year, and we're talking about building resilience. Now, who's going to build resilience if we have all these educated folks and we can't use that skills and knowledge to build resilience ourselves? So the point is, if you have that plan and you're paying for this education, it better be working for us. But coming back to talking to some of the students after they made all that promises during the election, we saw a year later, the students were complaining that they were going to be kicked out of school. Prior to that, we saw plane loads of folks at the airport, and I spoke to a couple of students who indicated to me that they were given tickets to go back home to vote. And one student explicitly said, I went home to vote for my scholarship. I am not making this up. And other students indicated that to get the scholarship, they had to talk to the ministers. To get to the scholarship, somebody had to bring them in some individual office in Portsmouth. To get the scholarship, I had to go and talk to minister so and so, and minister so bring me to the prime minister. I mean, what kind of program is that? So if we have a policy and the Ministry of Education has a policy, then why are we having all this backdoor or this side door, these channels to get to? So it tells me there's a systematic problem. There's a problem where we have something on paper, but what actually happens is totally different. And a student indicated to me the scholarship seemed like it was used as a vice. So after you make all these promises, you get them to study, invested in their future, you tell them we don't have money. Well, anything in life, if you have a plan, there's supposed to be results. So if I'm doing an experiment and I do A, B, and C, and I expect to get D, and I get E and F, then something is wrong. So obviously, if I had a plan for the students, I would have a budget. I would know how many students is going to study. I would know what resources we need. Let me give you a perfect example. In the state of Texas, what are the resources in Texas? Texas is huge with oil, natural gas. If you go to any school in Texas, one of the biggest programs is geology and energy management. Why? Because they need trained people to add value to that resource they have. It's of no value if it's in the ground. But if you educate your people, you train your engineers, you train your geologists, you train those folks to utilize those resources, then they add value to it. What do we have in Dominica? We have the land, we have the ocean, we have several resources. What can we do? Are we going to train our people so that they can come and add value to those resources? Because unless you add value to these raw materials, it's of no use. So the point is, after we made so many promises to the kids, it tells me that the end result of what we're seeing, the government doesn't have money to pay. The school had been owed over $10 million. That's MSU alone. Some of the kids were ready to be kicked out. We gave our personal experiences earlier. I came up here, I was homesick. I couldn't think of nothing but hope. Can you imagine? You just live in your home at 21 years. You just got a promise from the government, and only to be told by the school you're ready to be kicked out, you got to find money to pay for tuition. I mean, it tells you that there is not a plan. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Like I said before, if you have A, B, and C, you expect to get D. If you have A, B, and C and you're getting Y and Z, then something is obviously wrong. And if we don't question those things, if we don't ask, hey, what's happening here? Hey, 20 years you've been sending the kids to school. What? Where are the benefits? Show me the results. Show me the end result. Show me how that has improved our economy, improve our skill set, add value to the raw materials we've had. Then we have a problem. So I think in answering your question, I think from what I have heard from the school, from the students, and the results that I've been seeing, it tells me that the idea of having one college grad per household is great. The idea of paying for the students to go to college is great, but the intentions were deceptive. And I think that's where I live.
Yeah, and to just piggyback on what you're saying, not only is something wrong, but it seems like the system is broken because many times it seems like it's a surprise to the government that there's actually tuition owed. So I want to come back and continue this conversation. We have so much more to talk about, including whether or not the student should reapply for the scholarship each and every year. And we have to document the specific document that relates to that. So as we get ready to take your phone calls and we get ready to take your Facebook Live comments, if you have another way to get onto the internet, I would encourage you to go to pushpast10.com, PUSHPAST, the number 10.com, so you can read along with the document that we're about to read in the next section of the program. So again, PUSHPAST, the number 10.com. It is right there on the homepage if you would like to read along with the official documents which scholarship recipients receive. So now we want to go over to Lambi to tell us the phone numbers and invite your calls, your contributions, as well as taking some of your comments from Facebook.
Good evening, Dominica. The numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. And we do have a call on the line. So caller, please go ahead with your call.
Hello, good evening to you all.
Good evening.
Yeah, it's a very nice program. I think you all are what you call hitting the nail on the head. I know for a fact that there were policies guiding education before, and the government would then link that in terms of policy based on the country's need. And the country's need is not only lawyers and doctors and PhDs, but nurses, nurses, farmers, fisher folks, and all of those persons, because the country requires that kind of, resource person to be able to assist in its development. And when you educate a person or you train somebody, it's something personal to that person, but it is something valuable to the country because you want the country to grow. What has happened in recent time is that election excitement and promises has taken over the policy. And rather, persons get a scholarship based on merit. They get it based on the party they support, party in government, or how they give favors to certain people, and therefore they are awarded a scholarship. I know for a fact that before the government gives scholarship, and the government also pursues scholarships abroad with governments and universities abroad, that students from Dominican could go in and study. And they would study from start to finish. Then apart from you had various institutes like the Aid Bank, you had the Social Security, and other financial institutions here who gave scholarship. People would apply. Well, not give scholarship, but people would apply. One of your guests alluded to that, mortgage your property to send your children to school. So there was, if you like, total effort of the society and education. I know some business concerns here would also, if they have staff and they require the person to be trained or educated in some particular field that they need, would also assist in that line. But what happened was, is the government get people to rely on it for scholarship and became the only agency that would offer scholarship. And lead people into a way of, if you like, rely on the government for this scholarship. And it come to them, as you see the PAL rep or the party people and so forth, they get an opportunity to go. I know that there is somebody, I would mention the community, who was not from the government, but that person with a scholarship. I think he was a older boy with the scholarship. And your party had a meeting in the community. And the person was not riverside, quote unquote, but the person went on the platform to speak, just to be seen to get a scholarship. And then he was told, yes, I put your name up and I give them your name. So you must go and give something on the platform so they can see you. And he did that and he got the scholarship really. And is that how you train people, how you prepare your human resource, your human capital for the good of the country? So the country is where it is. And as a government, as a person in office, as opposed to administering stuff, you want at the end of the day for you to say, I have served 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, whatever years. And this is my work I've done. These are the people. You know, when a teacher said, I'm so proud of you. I remember you in preschool and how you were shy, and I worked with you, and you became go to primary, then you go to secondary, went to university, and today you're a good product in the community. I'm so proud of you. And that is what you expect. But the way it is going on there now is that you start students, they are at university, and all what they call mentioned, the guest mentioned earlier on the culture shock, discrimination, the racism that you face. On top of that, you're being threatened to be kicked out from the university is also a damaging thing to your spirit. But what I also feel disappointed about is the fact that they still behave as if the money that was paid for them to study belonged to the prime minister or the government in office. It belongs to the state, taxpayers' money. Whether you sell passport or whatever, it's taxpayers' money because the government is the custodian of the people's resources. And the only way you can fix things in your home, in your country, in your community, is to speak about the wrong things so that those who are committing the offense can change so that the society itself can feel the impact of change going forward. So it's a good program. I appreciate it. I will commend you all and say to you all, keep up the good work and keep up the education process because that's how a country learns. You must be free and fair on what they do and what they say. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, caller.
On the overseas line, please go ahead with your call.
Yes.
Good evening. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. I had a comment and hello?
Yes, we're hearing you. Go ahead.
Okay. I had a comment and it may be a little bit controversial. I was on Facebook answering and I have seen this conversation so much and we all know the parts of the conversation and how it goes. But again, I'm going to reiterate as with every single time I call into a radio station, I'm not hearing solutions. So what are the solutions that we are offering in place to remove that system that is there right now? And Len touched on a few of them. He touched on the fact that we should be looking at training people in skilled areas that would feed the economy of Dominica. So we would need to do that critical assessment and see what exactly does Dominica need and how can we facilitate the needs of Dominica to grow. I am very much against sending students to study overseas. One, it creates debt for the country and it creates debt that the government is incurring but gets no benefit from it. So we pay for all these students to go to study and very few of them ever come back to serve because most times the government cannot find a job for them to serve in the capacity they studied or because they decide to stay in the U.S. And that's the fact and that's where we are right now. And we need to address those issues. This is a way out for most people and they're using it and they're taking it. One of the solutions that I would like to think about is to petition the government during the election to have a serious panelist of people that does a study that comes up with solutions and say, listen, this is one of the biggest ticket items that is going to feed this election campaign. And it could be a neutral people that are not involved in any party, but we need to take this thing and bring it to another level. And that's just the views I have right now. And personally, I would not fund any more students. They need to come home. They need to go to UE, finish their education at UE. It reduces housing costs. I came here as a student, and the grind that you have to go to, the guaye you have to go through, and then you have to end up in a system trying to beat it. We need to pump that energy into our own country. Thank you.
Yes, and we will come back to answering your question, but we're going to continue taking the calls in the meantime. So guys, I hope you're taking notes as the callers are calling in. Yes, so let's go over. That's it on the calls, Lambie? Yes, so let's go over to Facebook. I know that you've been patiently waiting to hear your comments read on the radio. So we have Beverly Johnson, a blessed and good evening, everyone. Hi to the panel, Dr. Simone, always happy to listen to your programs. Thank you, Beverly, for being here. Amma, the reason for my point is that Given the opportunity to redo my education, I would have stayed in Dominica. I firmly believe the government policy for education should be structured to favor people who reside in Dominica, either for online learning or through UE. In the interest of time, Amma, I won't be able to read your full comment, but thank you for that. David Johnson, it is the responsibility of the government to create that enabling environment which could cause the students to return to Dominica. The fact that unemployment is extremely high in Dominica is certainly a deterrent factor in the situation. The UE campus in Dominica is incapable of handling the number of students studying abroad. This would mean that they would either have to go to Jamaica, Trinidad, or Barbados to study, which would most likely bring about the same problem. So all very interesting points that are being raised in the online forum. So I want to thank everyone who's sharing the comments. Let's just take two more before we continue. Let's see, David Johnson again. Everyone has the ambition to better themselves and in the process make a better life for themselves and their families. For some individuals, remaining in Dominica is not going to accomplish either. Certain programs are not offered in Dominica, which means that some people have to leave Dominica to attain whatever degree they desire. So all very good points. One more from Amma. I was one of those people and I am still against it. I would have been better placed in my country given the hardship I endured. I could have easily continued working and do my classes online. My university, Franklin EDU, went fully online in 2002, and there are numerous other colleges. And you see, this is the beauty of the conversation. We can disagree and not be disrespectful. So quite two opposing views from David and Amma in terms of if students should even be allowed to go overseas to study, as opposed to Amma, who's saying, well, they should remain in Dominica and take advantage of online learning. But online learning still includes tuition and fees, right? So we're right back to the scholarship that we were talking about. And I'm happy that the caller also mentioned the importance of solutions, because that is what we're hoping to provide recommendations on this evening, despite the fact that at the end of the day, the solutions really lie in the hands of the government. So all we can do here at this point in time is simply provide recommendations that we think would help in this situation. So guys, your thoughts on the callers and the Facebook comments?
Dion, if you don't mind, I'll go ahead. So I'll give you my personal experience with this one. When I was back in 1999, 2000, when I was thinking of going to study to school, I did do my research in terms of the cost of my education, and I did look at UE. And at the time, UE was costing probably $80,000, $90,000. I couldn't afford that. I looked elsewhere and found out that there were schools in the US that would cost me less. The intention was not to actually stay in the US. The intention was to get an education, advance myself, learn how they do things out there, and come back and share that experience in Dominica. Well, it didn't turn out that way. But one of the issues we have with the scholarship, as I said, it's an investment. It's an investment in your youth. So obviously, if you're doing an investment, you need to get returns. What I find is irresponsible of the way they're doing it. If you have passport money or wherever the case may be, I think if you're spending millions of dollars on an education, it has to come from some budget somewhere. It has to come from some revenue generation somewhere. And if it's coming from passports, there are more responsible ways that can be done. Because from my understanding, the government just gives you the scholarship. You don't have to pay it back. Some people have they sign a document saying that they are going to return and work for how many years. I don't know how many people do that. But instead, what the government could have done is, let's say you put $100 million for education at the 8 bank. Then the kids could go there, go through the same process. They can take those loans. And as responsible citizens, when they pay back low interest loans, then the other kids coming after will get an opportunity to go to study. And then the government doesn't have to be looking for $100 million every 3 years to send students to school, because there's a revolving fund. Another option could have been, yes, if you want to go study overseas, you can take a student loan. At the end of the day, if you're paying back, you're contributing to your society, you're contributing to the bank. As a matter of fact, I said earlier, the student scholarship was 8 banks' biggest revenue generator. You guys can go look it up for yourself. The government could have said, okay, we have some universities in the Caribbean. UWI, there's a campus in Dominica, there's a campus in Barbados, there's one in Jamaica. What are the resources in Dominica? We have fishing. Do we have any marine biologists who's studying, the fish populations in Dominica, the health of the fish, the resources? What they could have done, take a portion of that money and invest it in one of our colleges in an engineering department, in hiring top-class professors, so they can come to the island and instruct and impart their knowledge on some of the brightest and best in our Caribbean. So instead of sending that $100 million to the US, it stays within the Caribbean region. That money circulates in our curriculum block and eventually comes back to Dominica. That's another solution. And what we get is we get bright folks we recruit. They come here, the climate resilient stuff. We have hurricanes going around. You got some brilliant engineers who's using their creativity to develop new materials or new techniques in building, new techniques in land management, new techniques in earthquake, in landslide management, this kind of things. And that fund stays in the Caribbean. It stays in Dominica. It stays in that place. Now, I can't tell people where they want to go study. I mean, if kids want to go to the US, if kids want to go to Japan, if kids want to go, that's fine with me. But my overall point is understanding that, like I said earlier, we all have responsibility. We have responsibility as the government, we have responsibility as the students, and we have responsibility as the citizens to make sure whatever choice we make is going to work in the best interest of the students and the country. So there are negatives and positives no matter where you go. I think the option is making sure that at the end of the day, that vision is met by that investment.
Thank you. Dion.
Yes, in terms of some of the comments from the audience, it's a mixed bag. I appreciate all of the comments. I will say that I think all of the comments make sense. In fact, I support and I recognize that we are losing in terms of return on investment. Of course, it's a debt, and unfortunately, students do not come back home to contribute. I think one of the callers alluded to the fact that what are they coming back home to? And that's a serious issue. So yes, we are losing financing, and we are also losing human resources. So again, we are speaking here of what is called the brain drain, right? And so we are losing our brightest minds. With respect to whether or not an individual supports sending students overseas and studies, I mean, it's not just a straight shot. For one, I think Lennon spoke toward that, and I can confess as an experience. When I went to study, it was cheaper to study at the Western State University than in the University of the West Indies. I think I mentioned earlier the whole idea of if one can maintain a certain grade point average, that they would have been granted in-state tuition, which was tremendously cheaper than the University of the West Indies. And so that's a personal financial choice. There is also the issue of the subject matter. There are some fields of study that are not offered at the University of the West Indies. And so one is left with no choice but to go abroad to secure those skills. There's also the issue of quality of education. Undoubtedly, I think the University of the West Indies is a highly accredited school, and of course, the vigorous curriculum that the University of the West Indies has is second to none. I mean, we all know as students who grew up in the Caribbean that our work ethic is very hard, and our teachers expect us to perform. However, there are some schools around the world like Harvard and Princeton and Oxford with very distinctive history and accreditation, and persons sometimes want to achieve those as well. And I don't think one should limit themselves only locally. And so these are my thoughts when it comes to responding to what some of the callers said. Of course, I appreciate the first caller as well, who seemingly point on some of the suggestions that we are making. But one of the callers spoke towards recommendations. And of course, Simone, I was hoping, of course, to get to that point. But because she mentioned it, I can use that opportunity to share some things that I thought of. On the question of whether or not one must have a renewable contract every year for a scholarship, I would say blatantly no. Indeed, I would submit for consideration as a form of recommendation that if a student is performing and the student is in good standing, that the student scholarship should be unabated. Indeed, I believe the student should find incentive by knowing that with a good performance that their scholarship is guaranteed, right? One can also look in retrospect that perhaps the government want to have some oversight as to whether or not the student is actually going to school, whether they're performing well. And to that effect, what I would recommend is that there is a committee who deals procedurally with how the students are performing, and that would guarantee that the student continues to receive financial assistance. Again, it goes back to the substantive part of what we're dealing with. What is the policy? Is it a clear, written out policy? And so the student is not insecure. It removes anxiety whether or not that student would be funded. So that's one. In terms of recommendations and improving the status quo, or totally disregarding some of the lackadaisy problems that are going on here, I would say this. As a policy, I do not believe it is helpful when a leader within the government says statements that can be construed as derogatory. I think some time ago there was a statement made by a minister who I would say quite ill-advised, that asked persons to shake their pamper lamb.
Not funny. I'm laughing, but it's not funny.
Well, I did some research, and the listening public can do that research as well. If you Google pamper lamb, you will see in Trinidad and Tobago there is a word that is simultaneous with pamper lamb. I say this in all seriousness. When a student is going through these pressures of studying and a student needs help, first of all, if I have a daughter, and I would feel so sorry, even if I do not have a daughter. I mean, it's rude, it's unprofessional. And let's say, for example, that statement was made in jest, not in any ill manner. I would say that it's an ill statement, that you do not do that. In fact, what should happen in form of a recommendation is this. There is a study out there, Simone, which is called Mays-I-Made model. Mays-I-Made model. And there are 5 recommendations in which institutions and governments should help students. Number 1, it says that the policy, what we're talking about, the national policy, should be clearly written, that the administrators of such policy should communicate with the students and let them know quite clearly what are the expectations. That's number 1. Number 2, clarify expectations with specific language. And so a student must know, okay, I'm receiving the scholarship, I must score every semester, a B and above. Let's just say that's one of the recommendations. Or if, let's say, it was based on a need basis, that the student would have to intermittently submit financial statements that, yes, I am still in need. Something of that sort. So you clarify expectations in clear language. Furthermore, that the students must be reminded, remind. Say, student, you need to communicate with the Ministry of Education, your matriculation through the program, how far you are, when do you expect to graduate, and what are your plans after graduating. There should be this open sort of communication between the student and the Ministry of Education. Furthermore, number 4, again, it speaks toward the sensitivity of someone's emotional and psychological well-being. Instead of telling persons to shake their body parts, they should ask the student, how are you doing? Amid the COVID virus, how are you protecting yourself? Granted, the students can get information from the state in which they reside. Granted, it's expected that the education institution that they attend will give them some protocols. But even so, I believe the government of Dominica has a responsibility to care for the well-being of its citizens. And it doesn't take an email to say, hi, I hope you are staying safe. I hope you are using the protocols. I mean, credit to the Dominican government. I heard the Prime Minister says that he has never mandated vaccine. That's a good thing. But what I think is even better is that he encourages persons to take the vaccine. And of course, it's a personal choice, but it's a wise thing to take the vaccine. I'm fully vaccinated, and then give students what the science shows. Says, hi, I know you are away, but we, the government of Dominica, cares for you and want you to stay safe. And of course, finally, to emphasize with the students, say, how are you doing? Things are okay? Your tuition paid? Are you working? Please feel free to contact our office. There must be this sort of trust and this sort of consideration for a student who is studying from home. A third recommendation that I have would be something that I termed ethical pedagogy. In other words, the method or the paradigm by which we teach and by which we deal with students. This is not a responsibility only of the government. It's also a responsibility of the education system itself, the institution. And so one of the things is we have to move away from telling students, oh, you're on your own. Oh, if you cannot pay for it, that's up to you. Oh, when the government, no. These people are studying. They need compassion. And so we must move away from this, oh, what happened? You want to be spoon-fed? No, you're not spoon-feeding them. You are just making yourself more approachable. You're making yourself more amicable for the student. There is this thing, oh, if you cannot pay, that's your business. Or if you fail, no. It's the idea of either you sink or you swim. And the new pedagogy is saying that we should have a trust sort of attitude to tell the students, it's okay if you fail the first time. It's okay if you cannot make it this time. We promise you we'll help you moving forward, right? Also, teachers themselves need to be more considerate. If a student says, why did I get a C instead of a B? Instead of a teacher being so defensive, one must explain to the student, you got a C because of these. These are the rubric. And if you were to meet these requirements, then you would have gotten a B. Instead of telling the student, oh, I am the teacher and I can do whatever I want. And so all of these things come into a wider education policy that works intermingling with the education system, with the government, with the student, this triangle, if you will, this freeway street. And in terms of recommendation, I guess one last recommendation I would suggest is a recognition that students are non-fungible, i.e. that students learn at different levels, students have different level of resistance, students have different strength in terms of how they can cope with stress. And so governments and institutions need to be cognizant of that and work with students instead of being so insensitive. And I think I can stop there for now. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for these wonderful recommendations, Dion. And I think a lot of what you're speaking to speaks to structure, how all of this is structured. And it just brings to mind the thought of these emergency tuition payments that we hear about, where it almost seems like the government is caught off guard that all this tuition was owed to a particular university and now they're in a rush to make a payment. So there needs to be more of a structured approach where the students' grades are automatically being sent to an office, whether it meets the requirements or not, are then determined, and whether they're able to maintain their scholarships is determined in that way. So again, a lot of work to be done, and we're providing the recommendations for moving forward for our high-performing students. So Lennon, I know that you have a lot to contribute, and I want to make sure we get to that official letter. So again, if you're interested in following along right after Lennon makes his points, you can visit pushpast10, PUSHPAST, the number 10.com, so you can read along on the official scholarship document that we'll be reading in a couple of minutes. So Lennon, your thoughts?
Well, I'm just gonna segue into that letter because I think it relates to what Dr.
Okay.
George just mentioned, and looking at the time, I think it's important. So
Yes.
so this is coming from the Ministry of Education and Human Resource Development, and it says, read the Government of Dominica Scholarship Program. It says, this serves to inform you that the Government of Dominica will be responsible for payment of tuition on your behalf for an academic year in the amount of, a dollar figure. It says the tenure of the award is for a period of 4 years commencing September 2017 and is granted on the following conditions. So on paper, there are conditions, and one of those conditions is that you undertake to abide by the conditions of Midwestern State University authorities and conditions stated therein. That also includes being in status, and if your tuition is not paid, after 30 days, you're out of status and breaking the US laws. B, that you agree to observe the rules of the institution as they relate to the conduct and entitlement of students. Second, again, if the students' tuition are not paid and they're taking classes and they're ready to be kicked off, they're already in violation of the rules at no fault of theirs, but that of the government. And that's the government's requirements. It said the third one is that you enter into a bond agreement and there's a value which represents the approximate cost of the award to serve the state of Dominica on completion of the program of study for a period of 4 years or expiration of the award, whichever is earlier. That you submit annual progress reports to the government agency responsible for the administration of scholarship awards, the Human Resource Development Unit, Ministry of Education and Human Resource Development. That you maintain a 3.0 grade point average or GPA. Should you fail to maintain that said GPA, a first warning will be issued, and if consequently repeat, then scholarship will be withdrawn and you would be required to meet your tuition to complete your program. Should you require extension to your program for unsatisfactory reasons, the scholarship will be withdrawn. Should you choose to continue your study program, you will be required to undertake all costs associated with the extension. The next one is that you are not allowed to change your approved area of study without the expressed approval of the government of Dominica and Midwestern State University. And it says that you are not allowed to take leave of absence from your program of study without the expressed approval or permission of the government of Dominica and Midwestern State University. And finally, should you fail to adhere to the above conditions, your award may be terminated. And it has some other documents individual have to be signed. And it's signed by Chandler Hyacinth, Mrs. Chandler Hyacinth, the permanent secretary of education. By the way, Chandler Hyacinth was my history teacher in PSS. She was my head of department when I taught geography at PSS. She's a wonderful lady, a very good history teacher. I know she means well, but I think she's working in a system that has no control. But having read this, it says there are conditions. And here is what is ridiculous. Dion mentioned the minister of education telling the students to go shake their pampalam if they cannot afford to pay for the stuff. Here it is, there are conditions. I know for a fact that some of the kids met those conditions and their tuition was not paid. So the ridiculousness of the situation is where the minister of education tells the kids to go and shake their pampalam to make whatever they can do to pay for the tuition. Tells me that they don't care. Because if I spend thousands of dollars, and one of those tuition for the year comes out to 12,000 US dollars, you do the math, multiply that by 2.67. It's not the Labour Party money. It's the government of Dominica. As a result, every citizen of Dominica is responsible for the accountability of those funds. So the Minister of Education tells the kids to go and shake the pampalam, tells me she's not even concerned about the investment of the country. What I mean by that is if I'm spending all that money in the kids' education, I have a vested interest in their success. So when they encounter difficulty, I should make every effort to ensure that they are successful because their success depends on me getting returns on my investment, on Dominica benefiting from that return on investment. So if the government are willy-nilly doing these things, not even understanding that they are using the state funds for the student development to enhance the state, and then after you spend 3 semesters, 12,000 US dollars, and that kid is probably struggling for some reason or another, you tell them go shake their pampalam and not even any concern about their success in completing their education and you getting that return on investment. That tells you the callous and the ignorant behavior of the people we have running some of our ministry. As I said before, I don't think this is Chandler Hyacinth. I think, and I will call her name because she knows me and I know her pretty well. I think she's a wonderful lady doing her job in her position. But I think there are politicians at play who are using this scholarship program with the bad intention of playing politics. And a lot of the kids think that they can talk. And it would be nice to have a couple of the kids on the program tonight. They can share their personal experience. But the fear of victimization is so strong. And I keep wondering, why are we afraid? Why am I afraid? The folks in the ministry, in every ministry in the government, is putting there to work on our behalf. They are our employees. They work for us. And if they're mismanaging my fund, I have a right to ask them a question. And we have to understand that if we are spending millions of dollars to educate the kids, then every citizen have a right to ask for accountability without fear. Get that stuff out of your head. They can victimize you more than they're victimizing you already. They're already putting you under a stressful situation. One, they already don't care about the return on investment. They don't care about your success because they tell you go shake your pampalam somewhere like it's a cause. And then the prime minister says people are feeling how did he say that? They and feeling entitled. But of course you make them feel entitled. I don't blame the kids for getting the scholarship. But my point is, on paper, there are conditions. The government, by its own action, is violating its own conditions. And the government shows that it doesn't even care about the investment that it's making into the country. Like I said earlier, the Ministry of Education is one of the biggest branches of the government. It's been there for decades. It's been part of our government. So obviously, it shares a slice of the pie that is in turn put into the overall development of the country. And if we have people in the policy-making position in government not understanding that when they spend $12,000 of the state funds, they have to be entitled in the success of the students, that's a serious problem.
Thank you. Dion, your thoughts on the letter?
Well, it's the first time I'm being privy to it. It seems like a pretty serious letter. There are some stipulations there that I do not know the reason for those stipulations. For example, one that says that one ought not to change their major without the approved, expressed, I guess, of the government and so forth. And so I believe the government perhaps have its rationale why they are doing that. And I don't think it's too restrictive. I will confess. I think if they are providing financial assistance, one does not want a student to make mistakes by keep changing majors, because I can tell you as a professor, I have seen students change their major so often, before you know it, they 7 years go in school and they haven't got a degree. Right? So I think it's a wise thing to have some sort of control, yeah, over that investment. And so these are just my thoughts on it.
Yeah. And it's really just about raising the awareness because, again, without that national policy in terms of what is needed, like Lennon mentioned before, what is the 20-year plan for Dominica? What are the skills? What are the resources that we have available and the skills that we need to develop for the next 20 years? So without a national policy, we're pretty much just swimming in the dark ocean, and where the waves take us, we go. And if you need a favor, then you're offered a scholarship. So there really just needs to be more structure. So when we think of solutions, of course, our hands are tied because we're not the government, but we can continue to raise awareness that there's an issue, the system is broken, and attention needs to be paid to make the system a better experience for the deserving students, our talented students, high-performing students, to seek the academic opportunities that they deserve. And then we can have a whole other conversation. Maybe I'll have you guys back on the students who are not academically inclined. And what are we doing for those students? Are we providing them with the skills development that they need, despite not being academically inclined, but they too have skills that they can develop for the benefit of Dominica? So before we stop by to get your final thoughts, I see the clock is quickly ticking on us tonight. I just want to take a couple more comments before we sign off for this evening. So we have Kyle Kofi James. Great program tonight, Simone and the panelists. And he also says good night to Lambi as well. And we have another comment coming in on WhatsApp. One of the issues is how much money, if any, is provided in the annual national budget for scholarships, and what are the expected outcomes from this investment in terms of direct measurable impacts on projects for national development. Another one says much more use should be made of the University of the West Indies, which is very highly accredited with Ivy League schools worldwide. One hopes that our government in the region are maintaining the payment of their fees to UWI. So let's hope Dominica is not owing UWI millions of dollars. That would not help UWI at all. So some really great comments coming in via Facebook Live, WhatsApp, via the phone calls. So again, we want to thank you for engaging in this conversation and showing your interest in helping better for our students who are studying abroad. So as we get ready to wind down the program, we can take some final thoughts from you guys, and just anything you wanted to add to the conversation, this is your opportunity to do so.
Well, I want to be sure that I express that sentiment that this issue of late payment to students' tuition is something that does not only affect the student. One must be sensitive for the parents of the students who are in Dominica. I mean, put yourself in a parent's shoes. Have some empathy that you send your young daughter or your young son thousands of miles away, and you have fears. You have fears, one, that if the tuition is not paid, that he or her might be illegal in the United States, because often the visa is a student visa, and where you are not in status in school, then you're out of status legally, and that's a concern, and it's a genuine fear for the parent. Furthermore, where the parents are concerned, one must think, that some of these parents have sacrificed loans, and they have sacrificed mortgages, everything they have worked for in their life, their home. Some of them sacrificed their land where they work as a collateral to send their student on studies. But outside of those considerations, one also can consider the idea of the insult. I mean, I take that very emotionally, even if it's not my family, that someone would be so disrespectful to an individual. And so I can imagine how a parent would feel knowing that my daughter is part of those students, and this is the message that is coming from the government. That's not good, right? And so I want to live with those thoughts. I mean, that parents, persons care about the welfare of their children, and they care about, of course, the educational status and success of their children. And of course, the students themselves are human beings, and so people must be sensitive. And when we speak toward the whole idea of a national education policy and scholarship, as I mentioned earlier, we must talk about it in a very substantive way that clearly notes what it is, but also in a very procedural way as to how things will work and what is expected. I really hope tonight, Simone, that our conversation would have informed. I really hope that the recommendations are well taken, and that persons on either side of the political platform will realize that the intention, as always, is not to break down, but to build. That we care about our country, that we care for a better Dominica, and that our contribution is always geared towards informing, edifying, and uplifting. Of course, we want to thank God and thank Lambi and thank Lennon and thank the contributors on Facebook and those who called. And hopefully, as we continue working towards a better Dominica, that we will see changes that are for the better. And if this program can be one in which they can glean some information from, that would have served some of our purpose tonight. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Lennon.
I just want to say thanks for having me on the program tonight. I want to say good night to my folks listening up in Benz, my mom, Lucina, Mathieu. I just want to say thanks to Dion for sharing his memories and to our folks here at Q95. But we're on the topic of education, and like I said earlier, when you in the decision-making process, you have collective minds, and collective minds that are informed make informed decisions. Hopefully, through this conversation, through the depth of the conversation, what we can do is to allow people to have a more in-depth view of the scholarship program, the tuition program. Not, as I said, not just about whether tuition was paid or not, but what are the implications for Dominica? Why the investment? So if we are investing hundreds of millions of dollars into the kids' education, what are the return on that investment for Dominica? And over the last 20 years, how that has improved the life of our people, where we can build a prosperous and peaceful nation. And we build a prosperous and peaceful nation through having in-depth conversation, in-depth ideas, deep thoughts, and hopefully those deep thoughts can come into concrete action. We've seen for the past 3 years our parliamentary debates. We've seen our legislative branch of our government, and the level of conversation and the level of discord leaves little to be admired. And it tells me, what are we teaching our youth? If the folks who are in the colleges can't even speak out on their behalf. So we have a serious social problem with where we are as a nation. I also mentioned earlier the responsibility for Dominica's development, and the responsibility for our resources and the management of resources belong to the government, the student, and the people. And the government have a responsibility to manage the resources so that it can bear fruits, it can bear returns in that long-term vision for development. The students, on the other hand, though I sympathize with them, they also have a major part to play in that long-term vision and that development for Dominica. So all the students need to understand, if my country is making a sacrifice for me, with good intentions, I must add, then I should also be responsible for my country's development. And the people of Dominica who are listening to us right now need to understand that investment in education is for the betterment of the country. I don't have to talk. Dion George doesn't have to talk. I mean, we could have stayed silent. But the point is, it's our country, it's our home. And if all of us stay silent because it doesn't affect us, where do we go? How do we progress as a nation if we don't look out for one another, if we don't hold ourselves accountable? The hardest thing to do is to hold yourself accountable. And I think the people of Dominica need to understand at this point, not just education, but from what I see in our society in every aspect, we have to stand up and speak and hold the government accountable for its action. There's no way I am going to give somebody to invest money for me and turn my back, and the investor is doing what he wants and I'm not asking a question. It doesn't happen. That investment is the country's resources for our students, for the advancement of our future. And I will appeal to everyone to continue, because it's students' education, but we're talking about hundreds of $millions of state funds that have gone into education, and we cannot account for the return on the investment. Hopefully this conversation brings thought, it brings action, and hopefully we can have a better a program that is more tailored to where we want to be in the next 20 years. And the government and the folks think about how they can have a better program, and not to stop the program or to stop the funding of or the investment in the education, but to make sure that the intent, the true intent, is realized.
Yeah. And I just want to piggyback real quick on something else we talked about before, and that is the fact that many students don't return to Dominica. And again, without a national policy to direct the students in terms of fields of studies, then you're going to have problems with students not wanting to come back to Dominica because they're unable to find jobs. So I kind of just want us to have a quick brainstorm session in terms of the areas, if you were to make recommendations to the government in terms of the areas of study that the focus should be on right now, what would be those areas of studies? Because I want to make sure that we're leaving this program with concrete, solution directed information that we can put into action. So just let's have a little brainstorm session in terms of what are the areas of study that would be recommended. And the first one that comes to my mind is agriculture.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the first one that came to my mind. Um, of course, agriculture is still the backbone of, in fact, most countries in the world. And even if those countries are technologically advanced, people always have to eat, right? And that's why you can see the US government has subsidized their farmers like no other government has, right? So agriculture is one, but particularly on agriculture, I would say that we have to start focusing on food processing, right? And so we have the linkages, the economic linkages from the primary agriculture, from the farmer to the food processor. And so some of the fields might be in food production, right? Have some maybe associate degree or bachelor's degree to provide that human resource, but also to create an enabling environment that can perhaps give grants that would assist the person with that degree to achieve the goal of actually processing those foods and having local industries. So you are 100% correct on that. I concur with that. But also because I have observed the developments of hotels and the service industry, and we as Caribbean people, particularly Dominicans, we can be very loving and friendly, but sometimes we need a little polishing on our customer service skills. And so I think the area of hospitality and service industry, particularly in tourism, in the hotel industry for our tour guides, etc., is another area of focus, I would suggest. Indeed, if we can get persons to study, like Lennon said, fishery, and start to invest in deep freezers and perhaps ship boats and maybe get some training in some teaching techniques out there. That would be another area. And absolutely manufacturing. I know persons, even in Salisbury, who have their own little business, business in manufacturing and so forth. And so these are some that come to my mind quickly. And I think these are good. And of course, I mean, I know earlier a caller alluded to the idea that it's not just doctors and lawyers, but undoubtedly one cannot forget the need for medical doctors, right? Particularly in very unique area like physiotherapy. I remember my cousin from Roseau, this Joan. For a long time, I think she was the only person doing physiotherapy at the hospital, right? So I don't know how many physiotherapists they have. And so we need those specialized doctors, yes, in those areas. And again, it comes back to what I was saying earlier about a strategic sort of approach in giving scholarships, whether it's on a need basis, on a financial aid basis for the student, or whether it's on a strategic economic and development plan for Dominica. And so those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Dion. Lennon?
Yeah, it's interesting. We've always talked about agriculture. Agriculture is what made most of us in the islands. And interestingly, I was listening to a conversation that on Monday night in the Spotlight with a young guy. I think his last name is Geese, with some family from
Karim Geese.
Karim Geese. And it was pretty interesting listening to him. He also went to Cameron University, which is in Oklahoma, and came back to Dominica, worked in the corporate world, and finally he talked about raising chickens in the Marigot area. And one of his goals was to see that there was Atlantic chicken, I think, on every plate in Dominica and shipping in for the island. And I'm sitting on there, I got glued to the program, and it tells you how much we have to offer, and we have not reached our full potential. And one of the things he mentioned is that his business is growing, and now he can sit at his home, and he's not as much, he's involved, but he have people working for him. And out of that little business, guess what you can have? You can have packaging, you can have butchers, you can have vets, you can have marketing folks, you can have salespersons, you can have accountants. Out of that little business, if it grows, look at the amount of career opportunities you can provide. And one thing he said, as a guy who has a master's degree in business, he said we have to treat agriculture as a business. And unless we treat it as a business, we will not see the benefits of agriculture. And he's absolutely right. I've heard it from politicians, I've heard it from teachers. And what we have to do is look at the world today. I'm going to point out a few things for you. Pork, beef, rice, wheat, cornflakes, egg, milk, all these things. McDonald's, KFCs, the restaurants. One day a guy looked at me and said they must be growing wings by themselves, because he can't understand with so many restaurants the amount of wings they're eating. So that tells you the impact of agriculture on the global economy, right? So from our traditional agriculture, we've been basically just dealing with the raw material and looking for markets for this raw material to send them abroad. You're not getting much value from that. And what we have to try to do is to start adding this value to this produce, because that's what we've done. And once you start adding value, then you create a whole new set of industries, as Dion said: manufacturing, packaging, the accountants, the business, the trucks, the refrigerators, and do these things. Because we have been supplying the rest of the region with foods for a long time. And I think the biggest part of the education is changing the mindset to understand that these things are businesses. The raw material processing and adding value, it's a business. You need an educated workforce, and you need people to stop seeing these things as dirty jobs. They pay the bills, and that's what keeps the world running. So that is one of the areas. I also think one of the areas we need to invest in music. Dominica is probably one of the most talented countries when it comes to music, because of our unique Creole and our location. We do the English, we do the Creole and the Spanish. Over the years, some of the most talented musicians I have seen, the most talented poets, are Dominicans. But do we teach music as a serious language in school? Absolutely not. By now, every school should have an orchestra or string band or some band doing this kind of things. We have artists and musicians in Dominica, and nobody writes their music. Nobody records and documents them, put them in the musical form so that they can transcend the generation. This is an industry that we've not tapped into. And for a country that has just pure, raw, natural talent of musicians, I have seen the best there is. We don't have a serious music curriculum in our schools. I think every school should have a music program. This is another avenue for the kids to expand on their gifts and their skills and their talent. Who knows where they're going to end up? So that's one. I think in this day and age, we also should improve in technology. This world is increasingly becoming smaller and smaller with the advent of the internet, and people can trade goods from one and services in the blink of an eye with the pressing of a button. So we have to invest in our young people for coding. And thirdly, after the hurricane, after the Hurricane Maria, we heard the policymakers say that Dominica doesn't have the skills to do rebuilding. Dominica doesn't have the capability of building roads. Dominicans doesn't have the capability of this and that. Even to the point where the Chinese come in and said Dominicans don't have ability to do stuff. And it drives me nuts because Dion mentioned something earlier. It says a college student has the opportunity to make more money than somebody without a college degree. But I'll go further to say that skills, technology, these things are more valuable than studying lawyers and doctors. You know why? Because in the real world, the lawyers and doctors are cost to the economy. But when you go to the technical folks, they are the ones who create value, who adds value to the raw materials. So we need more skills. We need more high-skilled people. And I think with a good tax system and the encouragement of light manufacturing to come back to the region, we can have a population that is skilled and trained in doing electronics, doing this kind of things, building bicycles from recycled material, building components. There's opportunity to have green energy from a landfill. We have a landfill that catches fire every now and then, and nobody understand that it's because it's producing methane gas, and any striking lightning can cause that landfill to ignite. Here's a resource with 70,000 people. We can generate electricity from that. These are the kinds of things we need to think of. But if we don't invest properly with the good intentions for our educated young folks, we can't realize these things. So these are just some of the few things, and I also think the government needs to invest more in our tertiary education in the Caribbean. I think our dollar could go much further by recruiting top talented professors and scientists and engineers to develop our school system so that they can look at our resources within the Caribbean, within the Caribbean bloc, and see how we can add value to some of the resources we have in there.
Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wonderful job, Dion, Lennon, Lambie. Thank you for being on the console. Sherwin, thank you for keeping us connected. Our listeners of Q95, thank you for being with us this evening. Everyone who joined us via Facebook Live, I see Owen Prosper. Good evening to you, and thank you for being here. So thank you for joining us for another episode of Roots Connections on Q with Simone, Mathieu, and our guest this evening. And you know, as the world continues to evolve and rapidly change, like we were just talking about, we will continue to explore the changes right here on Roots Connections on Q, which will continue to impact the lives of our Dominican brothers and sisters at home and abroad. So we will continue to bring you timely topics. We will also continue to explore concrete and practical economic opportunities, financial independence, and how we can provide hope and inspiration, especially for our youth who are looking for direction for their next steps, for what are emerging careers and opportunities that they should pursue in order to earn an income, in order to be able to support themselves and their families. So this is what we're here to do each and every week that we are here for the program for Roots Connections on Q. We are here to build that social capital, the relationships locally, regionally, and internationally which will help us to assist in one way or the other and provide information to advance our lives. So yes, our Dominican experts are going to continue stopping by, whether it be in education, agriculture, culture, technology, the digital world. We will continue to bring in our experts from Dominica and abroad, and they will continue to guide us on what is the changes that are going on in our society and how we can adapt and adjust and to create a path forward in a positive way that benefits Dominica and helps to advance our life. So again, don't forget to keep it locked to Q95 FM, the big station for the best in programming, and to visit q95da.com for past episodes of this program as well as other programs as well. So remember, follow WiseQFM and Push Past 10 on Facebook. And for more information about everything you know about how I in particular am building a global international village of Dominicans, you can always visit Push Past 10. So again, it was wonderful being here with you for another episode of Roots Connections on Q, and we look forward to being with you. I think our next episode should be about October 13th, so you can mark your calendar for that. So with that, I want to wish you a good night, good evening, and you have yourself a restful evening and a productive rest of the week. So again, good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. Lennon, Dion, Lambi, thank you, and have a good night.
All right, Lennon, later. Lambi, one love.
All right.
Take it easy, Lambi. Simone, see you
All
guys.
right. Thank
All
you,
right,
Lambi.
bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.